Welcome back to the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by Madisonville Marine, G3, Hurricane, Skeeter, Stingray, Sweetwater. Deck boats, fishing boats, pontoon boats. Brand new boats, pre-owned boats. No one from the state of Georgia to Middle Tennessee has a bigger, better selection of boats than Madisonville Marine. Boats of all kinds. There is no better place to buy a boat. I've said it for years. I've meant it for years. You'll find out if you go down there and check them out. Highway 411 North in Madisonville. All right. As I mentioned in the last segment, Bill Hancock, Executive Director of the College Football Playoffs, had this to say this week. Clearly there will be challenges this year, and we will see what those challenges are and work through them. Whatever the season looks like, the committee will select the best 4 teams based on the protocol. Gentlemen, if you have the Power 5 schools all playing conference-only schedules, how do you pick the best 4 teams in the country?
I think some of it comes down to the eye test, which has been used before. Obviously, you got to have the results to go with it, but I think that's going to be part of it. The other part I wonder about, if you're a team, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, whatever, and you think you have an opportunity maybe to get in the college football playoff, you going to keep those starters in the fourth quarter a little bit longer? You going to tack on that touchdown late in the game to make sure you didn't win by 14, you won by 21? I wonder if some of that might come into play, but I think a lot of it has to be the eye test. This team looks really good. They're undefeated. They won by an average margin of 22. We're going with them.
Right. I was going to say, I think it almost has to be the eye test, right? You're going to have fewer games, which could lead to fewer losses. The flip side of that, though, I wonder, conference play is where we see most losses anyway. Could we see more losses across the board, and therefore the top 4 teams kind of separate themselves more naturally? If we're talking about a 10-game SEC schedule, what are the odds of more than one team making it through there with even 1 loss? So I wonder about that. Does it make it even easier if these teams are sort of beating up on each other within their own conferences?
I don't see how you can fairly do this. One of the things we do, and even this is kind of skewed, but if Alabama plays Southern Cal and beats the heck out of them, the national view is, the SEC is better than the Pac-12. Now, you're going to have that anyway. And I think where I'm going with this is perception has a lot to do with it, with the strength of the conference. That's with non-conference games being played. You take the non-conference games out of it, it's all perception, which benefits the SEC because everyone thinks they play the best football, hurts the Pac-12, probably hurts the Big 12 maybe, except for Oklahoma. I just don't see how you can fairly do this because we're not going to know which conference is better if nobody's playing anybody outside their own conference.
Kind of to Ryan's point, does Oklahoma have an easier road to going undefeated because their conference may not be as good as the SEC? So then are you going to take an 8-0 Oklahoma over 2 7-1 SEC teams? That's going to be really interesting to see how they do that. And then I think at times it makes it harder to judge strength of schedule if you're not playing non-conference opponents, like Ohio State was going to play Oregon and Alabama was going to play Southern Cal. That gives you at least a barometer to a certain degree. Without that, I think it does make it a little bit harder.
It complicates things for sure. I don't know. I feel like we have our perceptions of conferences going into the season most of the time. So I don't know how much that changes just based on Alabama, USC, and games like that being played. It matters. It helps fuel our perceptions. But at the same time, I think that to me, the games that determine championships and teams that play for championships are usually within conferences. I see Ohio State. It always depends on whether they trip up somewhere along the way in the Big Ten. For the SEC, does LSU run the table or lose to Alabama? All those things to me are settled within conferences. I think for the most part, the conference perception it kind of is already settled.
Here's another monkey wrench on this thing. So let's say you're Ohio State and you had 20 players test positive, and so they didn't play, and then you played against Michigan and lost. Okay, does that count toward the committee's perception? Well, they didn't have all their players. They had an unfortunate situation with all these COVID-19 positives that showed up. What do you do with that?
Well, imagine this. All right. Now these are happy problems because if we're talking about this in 3 months,
then we're playing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
I hope this comes true. But imagine this. Imagine the playoff committee picks 4 teams, and then those 4 teams get hit hard by the bug going, or one of the 4 gets hammered. You would have people saying, "Well, bump them out and put somebody else in." It's going to be interesting to see. Hopefully. Well, it would be interesting to see. Hopefully, it will be interesting to see.
I think Jimmy's point is maybe the best here. How do we view, we already see injuries and things like that play a role in this. How do we view anything that pops up related to COVID? Even a 1-week thing could be seen as a big deal.
What if a coach can't coach on a certain Saturday
and
the team loses? Is that because the coach wasn't there? I mean, we've never talked about that, the possible injury to a coach. But in this case, if a coach shows up and he's got the wrong temperature reading in the morning, my guess is they're going to have to send him home, you would think. That's going to be fascinating to see it play out, if it plays out, and I hope it plays out. When we come back, what if fall gets scrapped altogether? We'll tell you what one SEC athletic director said about moving to the spring. Come on back on the Sports Source.